Okay, so picture this, an entire nation built pretty much around just one man. Now, what happens when that one man is dying? Well, that was the situation in Iran back in 1989. We're talking about the revolutionary founder Ayatollah Khomeini. He was on his deathbed, and the future of the entire Islamic Republic he created was just hanging in the balance.
So let's set the scene. It's Tehran. For a decade, one man's personality, his charisma, his iron will, that's what defined Iran. But now, that man is fading. And let me tell you, from Washington to Moscow, an entire nation, and the world really, were all holding their breath.
And look, the question on everyone's mind was huge. Could the Islamic Republic even survive without its founder? Was it all going to collapse into total chaos? Or would someone new emerge? Nobody had a clue.
And you can bet the paranoia inside the regime was just off the charts. The then president, Ali Khamenei, he truly believed their enemies had, quote, sinister plans and were just lying in wait for this exact moment of weakness to pounce. So how did this all actually play out? In those final days, with all that uncertainty, how did a nation and its rulers really deal with the end of an era?
Well, you can imagine the mood among the public was just incredibly anxious. As newspapers like Al Raya were reporting at the time, people all across Iran were praying for their leader's recovery. But the official channels, they were completely silent. That silence from the doctors, it only made the whole country even more nervous.
Now, worries about Khomeini's health, they weren't exactly new. He'd had a major heart attack back in '86 that really got people talking about who might come next. But then, in May of '89, things really ramped up when he had surgery for a digestive illness. And just a few weeks later, on June 3rd, he was gone. His death, it was the definitive end of an era. And what came right after was this mix of, massive public grief and some pretty intense political maneuvering behind the scenes. And right away, you start seeing conflicting stories pop up. The official story was super vague, just saying it was an illness in his digestive system. But other news outlets at the time were reporting something much more specific, an advanced state of cancer. But no matter the cause of death, the public reaction was just immense. We're talking about Western news agencies estimating that up to 17 million people came out for the funeral. That's one of the largest funerals in history. It just shows you the kind of cult of personality that had been built around this one man. Okay, so the funeral's over, and now the real crisis begins. The founder was gone, and that left this huge power vacuum at the very top of the system he himself had designed.
The rest of the world was looking at this and was deeply skeptical. The Financial Times really captured what a lot of people were thinking. Khomeini was this unique, totally irreplaceable figure. The thinking was that the whole system was just so tied to him and his personal authority that it probably couldn't even work without him. And some of the predictions were even worse. There was this very real fear that all the different factions Khomeini had managed to keep in balance would just tear the country apart and maybe even kick off a civil war. And look, these weren't just fears pulled out of thin air. The Islamic Republic was incredibly fragile at this point. It had just gotten through a brutal 8-year war with Iraq, and it spent a decade fighting off rebellions inside its own borders. The state was weak, and the idea of a total collapse felt very, very real.
But then, what happened next was something nobody saw coming. Out of all this chaos, this uncertainty, a successor emerges that just about no one expected. In what was a really quick decision, the Assembly of Experts, that's the clerical group in charge of picking the leader, they chose the sitting president, Ali Khamenei. This was a huge shock. First off, Khamenei was just a mid-ranking cleric. He didn't have the religious authority, and he for sure didn't have the powerful charisma that Khomeini had. He was seen as a political lightweight, a choice that, as one report put it, nobody expected. But here's the thing. In spite of all those doubts, Khamenei turned out to be an unbelievably shrewd political player. He didn't just hang on, he built up his power. He outplayed his rivals and, get this, he's now been in charge even longer than Khomeini himself.
Which brings us to the final and, let's be honest, probably the most complicated part of this whole story, Khomeini's legacy. Decades after he died, how is he remembered? So today, you've got these two completely opposite narratives. The official story from the state paints him as practically a saint, a role model for freedom fighters everywhere. But his critics,
They see him as the architect of a repressive regime that made its own people poorer and spread conflict all over the region.
So, at the very heart of all the controversy around him is this one concept, vilayat-e-faqih. Basically, it's his core political idea that a top cleric should have the ultimate political power. It's the foundation of the Islamic Republic, and it was controversial from day one. And this controversy leads to one of the most serious accusations against him. Some sources claim that Khomeini was actually behind the disappearance and alleged assassination of a rival cleric, Imam Musa al-Sadr, back in 1978. The reported motives were all political. Al-Sadr didn't agree with Khomeini's theory of clerical rule, and he was seen as a threat to Khomeini's ambitions. It's a very serious allegation, one that points to a pretty ruthless pursuit of power.
So, where does that leave us? We're left with this question. Was he a revolutionary icon or a controversial, repressive founder? It seems the answer really depends on who you ask. And more than 30 years after his death, the Islamic Republic he built is still wrestling with that very same question.